Here are the top stories for today, the 3rd of March 2022. President Rodrigo Duterte signs an executive order adopting a national policy on the use of nuclear energy aimed at addressing power supply concerns amid increasing demand. The government is keeping a close watch on the welfare of Filipino workers in Hong Kong as over 200 of them have contracted COVID-19 as the Chinese territory grapples with its fifth wave of infections. Malacanang assures measures are in place to cushion the effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict to the local economy, as it also hopes for the de-escalation of tensions in Europe. And the Labor Department says the testing rule for unvaccinated employees remains despite the nod of full operations of industries under the most relaxed Alert Level 1. Good day, I am William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. President Rodrigo Duterte has signed Executive Order 164 that now includes the potential of nuclear power in the country's energy mix. EO 164 was signed by the Chief Executive last February 28, states that the country shall ensure the peaceful use of nuclear technology anchored on critical tenets of public safety, national security, energy self-sufficiency, and environmental sustainability. President Duterte issued the policy following the recommendation of the Nuclear Energy Program Interagency Committee, which conducted a pre-feasibility study and public consultation on the matter. The Chief Executive has recognized that nuclear power can be a reliable, cost-competitive, and environment-friendly source of energy based on the experience of highly developed countries. The EO also recognized the Bataan National Power Plant as a key facility to embark on the national nuclear program, but other nuclear power installations will be pursued. Moreover, the EO cited a public perception survey on nuclear energy in 2019, wherein almost 79% of Filipinos expressed approval or acceptability of the possible use or rehabilitation of an existing nuclear power plant. The same survey also shows that 65% approved the construction of new nuclear power plants and 78% are open to learning more about nuclear energy. Agriculture Secretary William Dar lauded President Rodrigo Duterte for his approval of their recommendations to boost local food production. During the meeting in Malacanang, Dar said it is imperative and urgent for the Philippine government to ensure that the country has an adequate, affordable, and accessible supply of basic food items as well as agricultural inputs. He also emphasized the need to help our farmers and fisher folks to be more productive and earn a decent income. The government has approved funding for the Part 2 of the Plant program, the realignment of the 2022 DA budget, the provision of concessional loans by the Land Bank of the Philippines and Development Bank of the Philippines to provincial LGUs for palay procurement and rice buffer stocking, and the transfer of oversight of the National Irrigation Administration back to the DA. Moreover, President Duterte also approved the DA's recommendation to distribute fuel discount vouchers to farmers and fisher folk to address the issues of increasing fuel prices in the country. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has economic, trade, and human resource implications in the country. Cabinet Secretary and Acting Presidential Spokesperson Carlo Nograles says mitigating measures and contingency plans are in place as part of the government's proactive response to the Russia-Ukraine war. President Duterte earlier convened his cabinet members along with the top officials of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police, and other high-ranking officials to discuss possible scenarios and measures should the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict continue and will escalate. The president also approved the recommendation of the country's economic team to strengthen the domestic economy, stabilize food prices, provide social protection, and explore diplomatic channels to help resolve the conflict. He also agreed to the recommendations of the Department of Agriculture to boost local food production to ensure food stability in the Philippines. Some 141 Filipinos are still in war-torn Ukraine as intense fighting in the country rages. The Department of Foreign Affairs said that out of the 141 individuals, 45 are in the capital Kiev, 55 are near the Hungarian border, and the others are spread across Ukraine. At least 87 seafarers are also on board ships docked near the country. Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Sara Lu Ariola said many Filipinos are still hesitant to go home and leave their Ukrainian family, while others opted to stay with their employers. Ariola said the Philippines would continue monitoring them to ensure their safety and extend aid, including evacuation support when requested. So far, around 40 Filipinos have safely crossed the Polish border, of which 27 sought refuge in Moldova, 9 in Austria, and 4 in Romania. Meanwhile, 10 more are expected to evacuate from Lviv to Poland. As of March 2nd, a total of 19 Filipinos have been repatriated from Ukraine, 13 of whom arrived last night from Poland via an Emirates airline flight. OWA Chief Hans Leo Kakdak said the 13 overseas Filipino workers who arrived from Ukraine will be provided with financial and livelihood assistance. The Diocese of Dumaguete on Wednesday called on the faithful to pray for peaceful elections in the country and an end to the Russia-Ukraine war as they observe the Lenten season. Bishop Julito Cortez said he has asked the faithful to pray for an end to the aggression in Ukraine in response to Pope Francis's call to dedicate Ash Wednesday for this intention. In his Ash Wednesday message, the prelate reminded the people that Lent is a time for repentance and remembrance of Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. He urged the people to be enlightened and emboldened in electing those who fight for the common good and not for the greedy interests of some. He also called for fasting not only on food but also on entertainment as an act of charity to help Typhoon Odette victims. Cortez quoted Pope Francis's Lenten message, telling everyone to reach out in charity towards our neighbors in need. Albay Representative Joey Salceda proposed a 4-point amendment to the oil deregulation law. This is in response to a request from Malacanang for Congress to amend the law to provide measures against an unmitigated rise in oil prices. Salceda said the most important component of the proposal is to create a strategic petroleum reserve that the government would stock during periods of abnormally low prices. The other components, he said, would require the unbundling of retail prices of fuel, updating changes in retail prices in a central government database for efficient monitoring, and price transparency. The palace has earlier called on Congress to review the oil deregulation law, particularly provisions on unbundling the price, the inclusion of the minimum inventory requirements in the law, as well as giving the government intervention powers to intervene when there is a spike and or prolonged increase of prices of oil products. Still to come, over 200 Filipinos in Hong Kong get infected with COVID-19. And the DepEd continues to encourage students to get vaccinated for face-to-face classes. Details ahead, keep it here on the PNA Newsroom.
Commander Dito Ocampo po ng Philippine Coast Guard Auxiliary para sa kumpanyang Disiplina Muna na pinangungunahan ng DILG. Bakit natin kailangan magpabakuna laban sa COVID-19? Dahil mahal mo ang iyong sarili, pamilya at bayan. Ang bakuna ang tiyak na paraan para tuluyang mapigilan ang pagkalat ng virus. May mga patunay na mababa ang porsyento ng pagkalat ng COVID-19 sa mga nabakunahan na. At matapos mabakunahan, malaki na ang tsansa na makabalik ka sa normal mong pamumuhay. Kaya tulad ko magparehistro na at magpabakuna na kontra COVID-19. Muli po, ako si Commander Dito Ocampo, Disiplina Muna Ambassador. Nagpapaalala, huwag matakot magpabakuna dahil bida ang may disiplina. Magparehistro tayo at magpabakuna para sa ligtas na pamilya, ligtas na bayan.
Some 221 Filipinos in Hong Kong have contracted the COVID-19 disease. In a Laging Handa briefing, Labor Attaché Melchor Dizon of the Philippine Overseas Labor Office says Filipinos in the area will be included in the mass testing. Dizon said out of the 221 COVID-positive Filipinos, 43 have already recovered while 8 are admitted in different hospitals in Hong Kong. He said the Philippine Embassy in Hong Kong is providing all kinds of assistance to them and will investigate and file cases against employers who terminated their contracts due to COVID-19.
Meron tayo dito na 95 na nasa sa bahay ng kasi dito pagka nag-positive ka na subject ka sa mandatory testing notice at nag-positive ka, makaka-receive ka ng text message na stay home and wait for the call ng Center for Health Protection para ma-schedule yung pag-pick up para madala sa quarantine facility. So, 95 yung nasa sa employee home, yung namang nasa sa government quarantine facility ay 22, yung mga nasa NGO facility na isolation is 22 din, and yung mga nag-stay pa sa boarding house waiting for the call ng Center for Health Protection ay 20, yung nasa sa hotel facility ay 6, yung nasa sa hospital naman ay 8.
All workers who are going back to their job sites must be fully vaccinated. Under the IATF rule, all the on-site employees or workers of an establishment are required under the alert level system guidelines to be fully vaccinated. All partially vaccinated employees in the public and private sector tasked to do on-site work need not undergo a regular RT-PCR test as long as their second dose is not yet due, according to the interval prescribed for the brand of vaccine received as the first dose. For those who are unvaccinated, they will be required to undergo a regular RT-PCR every 2 weeks at their own expense. Another batch of Pfizer COVID-19 jabs arrived in the country last night. The 804,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccines are procured by the government through the World Bank. National Task Force for COVID-19 medical consultant Dr. Maria Paz Corrales welcomed the arrival of the jabs, stressing the need to further boost the ongoing pediatric vaccination drive in the country. As of March 1, the government has vaccinated a total of 736,880 children aged 5 to 11 years old. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres said they are expecting the numbers to rise in the coming weeks as they encourage parents and legal guardians to register their children for additional protection immediately. The government is encouraging more Filipinos to get booster shots to be better protected against COVID-19 as it noted a low turnout of fully vaccinated individuals getting boosters. Marita Mowahe files this report.
Only one-third of fully vaccinated individuals who are due for coronavirus booster shots were found to have received their jobs. National Vaccination Operations Center Chief Mirna Kabutahe said about 36.7 million eligible individuals are due for booster shots, but only 10 million received them. She said some are thinking if a booster is really needed, while others don't see the urgency of the booster. The NVOC will conduct the 4th edition of the National Vaccination Drive on March 10 with the theme March to Vaccinate as they bring inoculation closer to people in their houses and workplaces. To date, NVOC data showed that 63 million Filipinos have been fully vaccinated, 93% of health workers, 62.82% of senior citizens, and 92% of people with comorbidities have been fully vaccinated. In Negros Oriental, despite the availability of vaccines against COVID-19, the province recorded a low turnout of individuals getting their booster shots. Assistant Provincial Health Officer Dr. Leland Estacion said, as of February 27, only 60,821 individuals have received the third shot of vaccine since the province started giving the jobs late last year. Estacion admitted a slowdown in the vaccination rollout in Negros Oriental but did not elaborate on the reasons. Meanwhile, at least 1,180 persons deprived of liberty at the Bulacan Provincial Jail have received their booster shots against COVID-19. Governor Daniel Fernando said Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines were used for the booster rollout programs spearheaded by the Provincial Health Office. Fernando said 755 PDLs were inoculated with booster shots last Saturday and 425 others last Monday. He said everyone in the province has the right to be protected against the threat of COVID-19. For the PNA Newsroom, I am Marita Muaje.
The Department of Education, or DepEd, is encouraging students to get vaccinated against COVID-19 amid efforts to open more schools that will hold in-person classes. More on this from Chris Mundo.
Education Secretary Leonor Briones is encouraging learners who want to participate in face-to-face classes to get vaccinated against COVID-19, although they are not required to get the vaccine. She said the Department of Education has a similar policy with the Department of Health regarding the needed consent from parents on pediatric vaccination. Citing 0 cases of COVID-19 among 15,000 learners involved in the pilot implementation of face-to-face classes, Briones said young children have high level of immunity against diseases. For its part, DepEd in Bicol said it has started to open face-to-face classes in the region and is expecting more schools to join. DepEd 5 said they are seeing an increase in the number of schools that will implement limited face-to-face classes if the region will stay under Alert Level 2 community quarantine status. DepEd 5 Director Gilbert Sadsad said all expansion schools have passed the school safety assessment test and complied with the interim guidelines on the expansion of limited face-to-face classes. Meanwhile, the DepEd in Socsargen is preparing 258 schools for the progressive expansion of limited in-person classes in the region. The progressive expansion also covered private schools, institutions offering special education, and the alternative learning system. Under the pilot phase, 24 schools participating from grade 1 to grade 3 and senior high school were allowed to attend limited in-person classes. Another 6 additional schools in South Cotabato have confirmed to be implementing face-to-face classes starting March 7. Meanwhile, the DepEd in Negros Occidental has sided with the principal of Negros Occidental High School, who refused entry to 13 personnel still unvaccinated against COVID-19 on Tuesday. In a statement, the DepEd Negros Occidental said it recognizes the effort of NOHS Principal Jose Terora in strictly implementing the DepEd Task Force COVID-19 Memorandum 575, which requires personnel reporting on-site to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Although eligible employees who remain to be unvaccinated may not be, they shall be required to undergo RT-PCR tests regularly. To date, a total of 4,295 schools started face-to-face classes, while 6,213 schools are ready for implementation. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
Authorities arrested a suspected drug peddler and seized some 414 million pesos worth of shabu in a buy-bust in Marilao, Bulacan on Wednesday. Brian Babang, Regional Director of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency Central Luzon, said the entrapment led to the arrest of a high-value target identified as Halon Supe Laureta of Bacoor, Cavite. They confiscated some 60 kilos of shabu, a vehicle, 3 cellular phones, and some identification cards. Laureta will be charged with a violation of Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002. More stories from the newsroom. The Transportation Department says the rehabilitation of the MRT-3 has been completed ahead of schedule. And a trade fair in Butuan aims to help small businesses recover from the effects of the pandemic. Back after a quick break, stay with the PNA Newsroom.
Paolo Millones po para sa kampanyang Disiplina Muna na pinangungunahan ng DILG. Bakit ba kailangan magparehistro sa pagpapabakuna laban sa COVID-19? Mahalaga magparehistro dahil ito ang unang step sa pagpapabakuna laban sa COVID-19. May 3 pamamaraan upang makapagrehistro ang isang Pilipino na nais mabakunahan. Una, ang online registration sa inyong local government unit o LGU. Pangalawa, ang pagpunta sa mga vaccination centers at pagkuha ng registration form. At pakikipag-ugnayan sa mga pinuno ng barangay o sa mga barangay health center. Tandaan, online, sa mga vaccination site o sa mga barangay health centers ang pagpaparehistro sa pagpapabakuna kontra COVID-19. Muli ako po si Paolo Millones, Disiplina Muna Ambassador na nagpapaalala, huwag matakot magpabakuna. Bida ang may disiplina. Magparehistro at magpabakuna para ligtas ang pamilya, ligtas ang bayan. Disiplinadong Pilipino ay rehistrado para maging bakunado.
Families in Antique whose houses were destroyed due to Typhoon Odette last December received shelter materials from the provincial government on Tuesday. The materials were purchased using the province's 8 million peso Quick Response Fund. The Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office has recorded almost 2,400 families with totally damaged houses. Each family beneficiary will receive 4 GI sheets and plywood sheets to be delivered by the supplier. Those with partially damaged houses will be provided with financial assistance from 1,000 to 3,000 pesos. The PDRRMO identified 20,100 families whose houses were partially damaged. In Cebu City, the city government on Wednesday started the house-to-house distribution of its 5,000 peso cash assistance to families whose houses were destroyed by Typhoon Odette. Mayor Michael Ramos said instead of handing out aid at the Cebu City Hall, they opted to go house to house to gather more information on the other needs of the victims. The DSWD deployed 12 personnel to take care of other problems on top of the cash aid. A total of 366.95 billion pesos in assistance has been distributed since December 30. The Department of Transportation announced it has completed the massive rehabilitation of the MRT-3. Transportation Secretary Arthur Tugade said that the MRT-3 rehabilitation project undertaken by Japan's Sumitomo Corporation Mitsubishi Heavy Industries was completed 2 months in advance. Tugade said the MRT-3 increased its operational trains from 6 to 22 with a speed of up to 60 kilometers per hour. Headway or train interval was reduced to 3.5 minutes from 9 minutes, while ridership capacity was expanded from 200,000 to 600,000 passengers per day. Meanwhile, Tugade said the construction of the common station is scheduled to be finished by the end of the month. Located at the north end of EDSA, the common station marks the intersection of the LRT-1, MRT-3, MRT-7, and the Metro Manila subway. Meanwhile, none of the passengers of the MRT-3 tested for COVID-19 in February were found positive, as compared to a 4% positivity rate in January. The MRT-3 said almost 500 antigen tests were administered in MRT-3 stations as part of its voluntary and random COVID-19 testing, compared to 1,335 antigen tests administered during the program's initial rollout from January 11 to 31. The free random antigen testing in MRT stations will continue in March despite Metro Manila and several other areas in the country being placed under Alert Level 1. A former New People's Army rebel has received full financial assistance worth up to 144,000 pesos from the government's Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program, or ECLIP. The Surigao del Norte Police Provincial Office said alias JR surrendered to authorities last May 23, 2021 in Barangay Pautao, Bacuag, Surigao del Norte. Governor Francisco Matugas handed over to JR the financial assistance on Tuesday. JR served as a Vice Commanding Officer of the NPA Northeastern Mindanao Regional Committee. During his surrender, the former rebel handed over to the government an AK-47 rifle with 8 magazines and a Stoeger shotgun, which was taken during the attack at the town police station in Alegria, Surigao del Norte on July 10, 2014. It said JR, after his surrender, returned to living peacefully and harmoniously with his family in their community. Some 79 micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, are participating at the Bagsakan Fair 2022 Panublion sa Western Visayas that runs March 2nd to the 6th at the Robinson's Place in Iloilo City. The Department of Trade and Industry is banking on the 5-day event to help MSMEs in the region recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. DTI Regional Director Rebecca Rascon said they are continuously helping their clients sell their products in a venue wherein at the same time there can be market testing whether their products attract buyers. This is the first Bagsakan held outside of Luzon and is organized with the Bureau of Domestic Trade Promotion. Meanwhile, in Butuan City, the DTI in Caraga has opened a month-long trade fair at the atrium in SM City in celebration of International Women's Month. The Buy Caraga Women Autopreneur Trade Fair features products created by women-led MSMEs that have been assisted by the DTI's One Town, One Product or OTOP Next Generation program. The trade fair, launched on Tuesday, will run until March 31. Let's take another look at today's biggest stories. President Rodrigo Duterte signs an executive order adopting a national policy on the use of nuclear energy aimed at addressing power supply concerns amid increasing demand. The government is keeping a close watch on the welfare of Filipino workers in Hong Kong as over 200 of them have contracted COVID-19 as the Chinese territory grapples with its 5th wave of infections. Malacanang assures measures are in place to cushion the effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict to the local economy, as it also hopes for the de-escalation of tensions in Europe. And the Labor Department says the testing rule for unvaccinated employees remains despite the nod of full operations of industries under the most relaxed Alert Level 1. As Filipinos, we all have a vital role to play in preventing the spread of COVID-19. So remember, wear your face masks and face shields, wash your hands often, practice safe physical distancing, go out only for essential reasons, and get vaccinated as soon as possible to protect ourselves, our families, and the community. Together, we can beat COVID-19. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. For more news content, check our webpage or log on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day, everyone.